in other solar systems, possibly even in other galaxies. I mean, true universal healthcare, I can believe, is very ungodly expensive. But the kind that you have, which I guess we would have to call non-universal healthcare or American healthcare or some American healthcare, unless you're over 65 and already get Medicare or are a veteran or have private health insurance or are freaky rich or, oh, John's pointing at me. Just tell me it's time to start the show. I was talking about healthcare. You don't care. You missed that part. At the beginning I said, no one cares about healthcare anymore. We're just glad it's passed and don't need to hear about it. So I'm done talking about it. Unless I run out of things to talk about. And then I'll come back and make up more crap to talk about on my TV show. I told you John pointed at me, and I'm wearing John's t-shirt. See, it says Monday Night Dinner. I was top eater number 2 for last year in John's Dinner Club, which John started with me. It was our idea. And by our idea, I mean mostly it was his idea. I just went along with him because he seemed so sad. See, now I have to button the shirt because I am ungodly brightly lit tonight for some reason, and I have a white t-shirt on, and Loretta was like, "You're burning our retinas out here in the control room," with the reflection off that white t-shirt, so I have to button it so you'll only see the Hawaiian shirt. But I wanted to show you the Supper Club t-shirt from John because lots of people do set up supper clubs where, you know, a group of people get together every week and have dinner somewhere, and they rotate. Sometimes people do it in their houses. We do it in restaurants. We invite a bunch of our friends. Most people don't make t-shirts. And most people don't make elaborate point systems. Where, I mean, sometimes people would go, well, fine, we'll set up a point system. If you come to dinner, you get a point. But no, John has a complicated point system. Not quite as complicated as the NCAA point system for deciding who goes to the tournaments or who's the winner in college football, but it's almost that complicated. Like if you come to dinner, you get a point, but if you RSVP and don't come, you lose a point, and if you don't come and don't RSVP, you're the same, but if you suggested the restaurant, you get 2 points, unless we've been there before, in which case you get no point. We're a dinner full of engineers, and none of us understand the system. And I got on the topic of John, I originally wasn't going to talk about him at all because I know it gives him such pleasure. But I made a mental note to myself over the weekend that I had to mention John on the show, and here's the reason. As you know, I have a girlfriend. I live with my girlfriend. And on the weekend, we try to get things done. This weekend, of course, we got an hour and a half less done than normal because Loretta had to talk to John's wife, Stacy, on the phone for an hour and a half because Stacy needed to vent about John. Just saying.
Wow, that's pretty rough.
Perhaps you'll see why I'm a little crazy occasionally. Anyway, something else I'll briefly mention. I'm sure you've noticed by now I got my hair cut again because it's kind of vaguely short instead of all pointy everywhere. I went to the same guy I went to last time, cut my hair, did a great job. I made exactly the same mistake this time that I made last time. So I'm mentioning it on the show so you people can email me. The next time it's about time to get my hair cut, because that's what tends to happen. The emails kind of come in. They're like, hey, Keith, I love the show. I was watching episode 117 where you were talking about Blade 2 again. And by the way, you should get your hair cut because it's looking a little stringy. And I'm like, okay, thanks for the feedback. And then there'll be a 5-paragraph digression, you know, about symbolism in Blade 3 versus Blade 2, and how the backstory for the vampires really just got ruined in Blade 3. I mean, I think we'll all agree that Blade 1 and Blade 2 were great films in that series, and Blade 3, just like, you know, Star Wars 1, just totally ruined the franchise. Where was I going? Oh, yeah, haircut. We get to the end of the haircut, and the nice gentleman that cuts my hair kind of turns to me and he says, would you like me to cut your eyebrows? Okay, now if anyone that knows me for long knows that if they ask me a question And if the answer to that question, if I say yes, is I get something for free, or essentially if I get more, I've already paid for the haircut. I don't think you're charging me extra to cut the eyebrows. So sure, throw in the eyebrow cut. That way, when I get home, I'll be able to be like, yeah, I got my hair and my eyebrows cut. So he's like, would you like your eyebrows trimmed? And I'm like, sure. And then he's got that little buzzer thing. And then he grabs like a little comb and he holds a little comb up to my head. And then he kind of goes, wee, okay? And just like the first time, after I said yes, when that comb came in, I realized I had made a horrible mistake. Because with a comb and a buzzy thingy, okay, sure, he's been to barber school, but he's an eighth of an inch away from making me look like a deranged serial killer who's got no eyebrow. Because I've mentioned this before, I had a friend in college who got really drunk one night and shaved his head. I don't know why he thought shaving his head was a great idea, but he was really drunk. And a lot of stuff when you're really drunk seems like a good idea. I think we've all been there. But while he was shaving his head, apparently he was looking in the mirror and he thought, well, eyebrows are hair. So he shaved his eyebrows off too, because he was shaving his head and the eyebrows are on the head, so completeness would mean that he's got to get them too. You can't look at a man who's got no eyebrows, okay? Your eyes track up and down. They don't know where to stop. They're just like circling around the face looking for something, I know there's a person there. I can hear a voice, but actually, I saw a couple days ago, they were like, here's makeup patterns you can put on your face that'll foil facial recognition cameras. And they're like, you put a big black spot over one eye and a white spot over the other one. Like, we tested it. And I'm like, you people got too much free time. I don't really care about what the cameras see me doing most of the time. And the time I do care, if the cameras see what I'm doing, I wear a mask. Ski mask. And lift shoes. Because, when the police are like, yeah, the suspect is between 5'10" and 6 foot. And he looks a lot like Keith with a ski mask. And I go, but officer, I'm only 5'8.5". And they go, oh, foiled, darn. I guess that wasn't you spray painting those naughty words. Before I forget, very special, tonight on the show, I promised stuck at origami before the end. People have asked about it forever in the forums. They've said, Keith, you keep teasing us with the origami. When are you actually going to get to origami? Tonight is your night. Stay around. Stay to the end. Don't leave if you care about the origami stuff. I'll come back to that. Okay, here's a piece of paper. See, I've already crossed out the stuff I talked about. So we're down to the first one, which is exterminator. I recently paid a man to come to my house and spray poisonous chemicals all over the place. And people say, this seems dumb, Keith. Why would you pay someone to spray poisonous chemicals all around your house? And I'll tell you why. It's because I have cockroaches in my house and I hate them. And I'm vaguely embarrassed telling you I have cockroaches in my house. And I thought, well, why would you mention this on TV, Keith? And then I'm like, I'm an idiot. And I say all kinds of things that make me look really dumb on TV. And I'm like, well, having cockroaches really shouldn't make me embarrassed. It's not like I invited them in. It's not like I pal around with them, right? I live in a townhouse, right? They can come from anywhere. And in this case, they're coming from outside. And they're like coming from outside because it's wet outside and they don't like that. So the exterminator told me. He might have been making that up to make me feel better. Although, truthfully, I don't think he was making stuff up to make me feel better because he kind of struck me as this weird libertarian, I hate everyone kind of guy. Which I think would fit if you were an exterminator and if your job was to drive around killing things. Tiny things, professionally, for a living. Because I think you could be a bit of a social outcast and be an exterminator and people wouldn't find it weird at all. So I called the company They got recommended. And I'm like, yeah, I would like you to come spray my house for cockroaches. And they're like, do you know what kind? I'm like, the little kind. The little brown kind. I didn't know there were kinds. And he's like, are you sure they're cockroaches? And I'm like, I'm pretty sure, but how would I know? Like, if I found tiny Proust books around, would you, I mean, is there something, how, I'm like, I'm sure they're cockroaches. And he's like, well, are they German cockroaches or Asian cockroaches? And I'm like, I don't speak German or Chinese. How would I know? And then Loretta was like, well, I think they're both. And I'm like, we have both. Our house is a veritable international house of cockroaches.
Oh.
And so the guy's like, okay, we'll come out on Monday. Empty out your cupboards. I'm like, well, that's great, because when I moved into my house 17 years ago, we hated the contact paper in the cupboards. And I always thought I should change that contact paper because I hate it. But I never did, because there was always crap in the cupboards. Till I emptied them out so that the nice man could spray them with the deadly poison. Which he did. He came to my house and he's like, yeah, we're going to spray everything. And I'm like, and it'll kill them? And he's like, oh, it'll kill them. And I'm like, it won't kill us? He's like, no, it won't kill you. Unless you lick the baseboards. Like, I don't lick the baseboards anymore. Okay, I never licked the baseboards, but good to know. Good to know. So we pulled everything back and he sprayed. And then he's like, and now I got to spray under the cupboards, under the sinks, and you have to leave the house. And I'm like, no one mentioned that before. He's like, no, you got to be gone for 4 hours. And I'm like, cats too? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, well, I guess we better plan different. So we took the cats and we put them in little cat boxes, or prisons, as I think the cats think of them. They're like, I don't know what was wrong. I got up in the morning and suddenly I was in jail. It's got to be how the guys at Gitmo feel, at least some of them. Like, I was minding my own business in Afghanistan and suddenly I was in Cuba. Although for the cats, it was only for 4 hours. Although, who knows, to a cat, 4 hours might be a long... No, 4 hours isn't a long time to a cat. I've seen my cat nap more than 4 hours. I've seen my cat nap more than 12 hours. I have left the home... I have left my house in the morning at like 8 a.m., and my cat has been laying at the foot of my bed, kind of flopped over on its side, with its head kind of tilted a little angle. And while I've gotten home, the cat has been laying in the same place at the same angle. I'm like, you haven't moved all day. Cat's like, yes, I did. I'm like, no, you didn't. Cat's like, prove it. I can't prove it. That's the exterminator. I paid this guy, okay? I paid him good money to spray what's probably industrial chemicals that they're getting money from someone else to get rid of around my house to make the cockroaches die. Now, here's the other great thing that they don't tell you. And I know why they don't tell you this, because if you called up the exterminator and you said, I would like you to come kill all the cockroaches in my house, and they're like, we'll be there on Monday, and you're like, and you're going to take the cockroaches with you, aren't you? And they're like, well, no, we leave them there. We're just spraying. And I'm like, well, then what will happen to the cockroaches? They're like, well, for the next month, as you walk around your house every morning, you'll find dead cockroaches. It's like, before my problem was I used to walk around and find live cockroaches, okay? You haven't solved my cockroach problem. You've solved my finding live cockroach problem by turning it into a finding dead cockroaches problem, which is not quite as great of a customer service story as I would like. But they tell me in like, 2 weeks, there won't be any more. And then I'll be happy because I won't feel all creepy walking through my house. Which I do. You shouldn't feel creepy walking through your house unless you bought one of them haunted houses with the A-frames and the windows that look like eyes and the mirrors that show dead people. Look, see, I talked about this one. I got to cross this off. Okay. Okay, here's the next page. Notes at the top, it says hell in a handbasket. I'm 43 years old, and near as I can tell, my body is going to hell in a handbasket. When I was young, I was happy and in reasonably good shape. And now now I know why we need healthcare reform, because I need healthcare. Or more specifically, I need some tiny amounts of healthcare. I may have mentioned it before, like I'm trying to stop biting my fingernails. You'll notice I don't have long, beautiful, luxurious fingernails, because I'm currently failing at not biting my fingernails. I'm doing a little better than I used to in that you can see a tiny bit of fingernail here, but really not enough to speak of. And I was thinking to myself, what kind of people bite their fingernails? And I'm like, dumb people bite their fingernails. Like 6-year-olds know how to not bite their fingernails, but apparently I don't. So I must have missed that day in first grade when they were like, today we're going to learn the letter P and the numbers 6 and 7, and we're going to talk about how to not bite your fingernails, class. You don't bite your fingernails, and that's how you do it. All right, this is what a P looks like. It's got a line and a curve. A line and a curve. What are you going to do? I continue to try to lose weight. Now, I've mentioned buying the very expensive bicycle, which I can use to bike into work and thereby lose weight and become svelte and sexy and in shape. I feel bad because I haven't been riding the bike. Now, I do console myself by saying, you don't ride the bike because it's raining. And riding a bike in the rain is miserable and a good way to die. Because bikes have brakes that work by friction, at least mine does. So this little rubber thing pushes against the wheel, and that's what stops the bike. But in the rain, there's a thin layer of water on the wheel. So when the rubber pushes against the wheel, the rubber just gets wet and the wheel keeps going. Thus, the bike doesn't stop, and you drive into traffic and are killed. Plus, when you're biking in the rain, you just get wet. Really ungodly wet. And I don't like being wet and cold on a bike about to die. So it's coming into summer or spring or whatever the heck you call the season in California where it doesn't rain. We should have a word for that. Like, they have the monsoon season, and what's the opposite of the monsoon season?
Dry season.
Well, they say the dry season, but I just mentioned it was raining, so that would be a dumb word for it, wouldn't it? I've also mentioned this before. I have sleep apnea. So I now had to go out and get a machine that blows air into my nose so that I can sleep. And I was like, how frickin' stupid is this? Like babies know how to sleep. Like, I don't want to say, sleep like a baby, because truthfully, babies sleep like crap, right? They wake up every 4 hours screaming. Let me tell you who knows how to sleep. It's 5-year-olds in a minivan. Okay? I have seen my nephews, right? Like, you put my 5-year-old nephew in a car, in a little car seat, and like a minute and a half later, he's just like, out like a light. Happy as a clam. They get somewhere. I mean, it's like the noise of the shifter going into park is what wakes them up. They get there, park, and he's like, bling, and then he's off like a rocket to the playground. I wish I could sleep like a 5-year-old. Oh, there's origami. I'm going to skip that. Remember, I promised origami at the end. The next is Twitter painting and eBay. And they kind of go together, even though I have drawn these are separate topics things in front of them. They're really kind of the same thing, which is there's an artist in Canada that paints things, and then she sells them on eBay. And she's vaguely famous because she does this comic strip for the Mac Joy of Tech or something. I forget what it's called. Every once in a while, she paints something and she puts it up for auction. And a while ago, I bought one of her paintings. It was a painting of Pac-Man, which I have hanging in my computer room. I love it. It's like a little painting of the Pac-Man screen. And you're like, is it art? I don't know. I just have a degree in philosophy. And truthfully, when I took the class in aesthetics, in which, as I recall, the first lecture, the professor was like, in this class, we're going to talk about what art is. And let me tell you, in an aesthetics class, you talk a lot about what art is, but you never talk about what art is. Like, they never get to what actually is art. They're like, well, this could be art. I'm like, people are freaking college professors. Just write it down. Just, if you go over to computer science, they're going to be like, we're going to talk about what a loop is. And you're like, is this a loop? And they're like, we can't answer that yet. I took it from the same professor. I had the same TA in that class as I had in my other class, where our TA was writing a book on whether forests have rights. And we thought this was an interesting question. We said, why would forests have rights? And he said, well, I started with the idea of whether trees have rights. And I thought, well, okay. I mean, I agree. If you're going to ask the question, do forests have rights, you might want to start with, do trees have rights? And he said, I don't think trees have rights. And I'm like, okay, good. That's a definitive statement. And he said, but I think forests do. And I'm like, forests are made of trees. It's like, yes. I'm like, trees don't have rights, but if you got a lot of them, you do have rights. And he's like, yes. I'm like, this is just like frickin' integration. Okay, like you get to math, okay, you get to calculus, and they come in, they're like, on like day 4 of calculus, they're like, here's the fundamental theorem of calculus. And you're like, wow, this is a 3-semester class, but you're going to teach me the fundamental theorem of calculus first? And I'm like, this is great. I got 2 3/4 semesters. I don't have to come in anymore because I've learned the fundamental theory of calculus. And they're like, if you're trying to sum up the area under a curve, you draw lots of tiny little boxes. I'm like, great, tiny little boxes. I don't know how to find the area of a box. And they're like, and you make the boxes really small. And I'm like, well, okay, small boxes, great. You want whatever size box you want. And they're like, you make the boxes so small that the area inside them is 0. And I'm like, okay, very, very tiny boxes. And I'm like, they're like, and you add the area of all those boxes up. And I'm like, area of the box is 0, right? And I'm like, yes. I'm like, so I'm adding a bunch of zeros. And they're like, yes. And they're like, and then you get the area under the curve. And I'm like, you get 0. I'm like, no, you get the area under the curve. And I'm like, you got 0. You started with 0, ended with 0, in between, all 0, bunch of plus signs, number. And they're like, you got it. I'm like, it's going to be a long 3 semesters. Really long 3 semesters is what that was. How did I even get on this? I don't remember. Oh, I was talking about Twitter paintings. Somehow from Twitter paintings, I got the fundamental theorem of calculus. Anyway, so this woman, she paints pictures of things, and they're art or they're not art. And like a week or 2 ago, she's like, I have painted the Twitter logo. And I was like, okay. She's like, and you may buy it from my store. You can bid on it on eBay here. And I'm like, okay. Opening bid $155. And I'm like, I'd pay $155 for painting a Twitter. I mean, I'm not going to get it. Someone else is going to bid it up. Last one went for like $700. I'm like, sure, $155 on Twitter. And then I forget about it. Because if you know me, you know that's the story of my life. I just do things and forget about them. You know, 2 weeks later, I get email from Twitter. You've won this auction. I'm like, frickin' spam. Okay. And after I've deleted it, I'm like, wait, I did bid on something. What did I bid on? So now I got to go to the trash and dig the email out. I'm like, wow, I won that photo of the Twitter logo. What am I going to do with it? So I send her the money. She sends me the painting. I'm happy. I'm going to hang it in my office. Speaking of Twitter, here's a big thing. As you know, I'm huge on Twitter. I have several hundred followers, which puts me in, I think, the top 200 million people on Twitter. I know of cats that have more followers than I do, but those cats do interesting things. Whereas, well, I do a lot of stuff on Twitter. And if you follow my Twitter feed, you'll know I'm constantly go, 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 zig, zig, zig. He's there, he's there, he's everywhere. So, for example, I was in South by Southwest about a month ago. Went out there, saw a bunch of things. But I had to leave South by Southwest on Twitter early. I couldn't see all of South by Southwest on Twitter. I didn't actually go, okay, but on Twitter, I went to South by Southwest, and I put the little pound S by SW in all the Twitter feeds. Anyway, I had to leave South by Southwest on Twitter early so I could come back to California to stand in line to get an iPad on Twitter. So for the past 2.5 weeks on Twitter, I have been standing in line at the Apple Store in Palo Alto to get an iPad. And so every day or two, I tweet about standing in line to waiting for my iPod or my iPad. Meanwhile, of course, I'm at my job working because they don't let me out of work for 2 weeks at a time to stand in line to buy a product that we have in the office next to mine, right? They're working on the iPad all the time. If I needed an iPad, I'd just be like, Darren, I need an iPad. And he's like, okay, here you go. Now, most of my tweets, I lie a lot, and people don't care. But standing in iPad line, people actually think I'm standing in iPad line. And so they're like, Keith, really? Are you an iPad line? And for a while, I thought, well, these people are just dumb. You know, they don't realize I'm not standing in iPad line. Then I had this horrible realization. They're not the dumb people. Here's the thing. They're like, what kind of moron would stand in line for 2 weeks to get an iPad? Almost no one. But Keith is enough of a moron to do it. And Keith is tweeting about doing it, so Keith must be doing it. Actually standing. I'm told there's very little time left in the show. And as you know, I promised to get to origami before the end of the show. I can't talk about Hot Tub Time Machine at all. Okay, we went and saw Hot Tub Time Machine. It's a good movie. You might enjoy it, especially if you enjoy movies about hot tubs or time machines, or the 80s. Oh, shucky darns, we are totally out of time, and I was unable to get to origami. See you next time, everyone. See, that was my April Fool's Day thing. See, I kept promising to get to origami, but I had no intention of getting to origami. That was really, it was April Fool's Day.